Have you ever wondered why your prayers sometimes feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling, echoing back into an empty room where no one is listening? You're not alone. Millions of people around the world pray every single day, yet so many carry this quiet desperation, this gnawing feeling that despite all their pleading, begging, and bargaining with God, nothing fundamentally changes. They ask for healing and remain sick. They pray for abundance and stay trapped in lack. They cry out for peace and continue drowning in anxiety. What if I told you that the problem isn't that God isn't listening? What if the entire way you've been taught to pray has been keeping you from experiencing the very power you're desperately seeking? Now here's something that might completely transform your spiritual life. Smith Wigglesworth, one of the most powerful figures in Christian mysticism, discovered a truth so radical that when you truly grasp it, your entire relationship with prayer and with God will never be the same. He realized that when we pray to God, we're unknowingly creating the very separation that keeps our prayers powerless. Think about it for a moment. Has this ever happened to you? You pray with all your heart, you use all the right words, you even feel emotional and sincere, yet somehow there's this invisible wall between you and the divine answer you're seeking. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's what most people never realize. Traditional prayer, the kind we've all been taught since childhood, operates from a fundamental assumption that's actually working against us. When you kneel down and say, "God, please help me," you're unconsciously declaring that God is somewhere out there, distant, separate, and you are down here, broken, lacking, incomplete. Every time you beg for something, you're reinforcing the illusion that you're cut off from divine power. You're literally programming your consciousness to believe in separation rather than union. Stay with me until the end because what you're about to discover might surprise you. It might even seem impossible at first. Smith Wigglesworth taught something that sounds almost blasphemous to religious ears. Yet it's actually the deepest secret of mystical Christianity. You are not separate from God, you never were. The divine presence you've been praying to isn't somewhere in the clouds watching you struggle. It's the very consciousness that's reading these words right now. It's the awareness behind your eyes, the life force animating your body, the intelligence that beats your heart without you even thinking about it. What would happen if instead of praying to God, you learned to pray as God? What if recognition replaced petition? What if you stopped begging and started being? The implications are staggering, and they're not just theoretical. They're immediately practical. People who grasp this shift experience healings that medicine couldn't provide, breakthroughs that logic can't explain, and a peace that circumstances can't disturb. But how does this actually work? And more importantly, how can you begin practicing this revolutionary approach today? So let me share with you the exact mechanism that creates this transformation. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The entire journey from powerless prayer to powerful recognition hinges on one critical shift in your mindset. When you pray the traditional way, you're essentially reinforcing a story about yourself that keeps you trapped. Every time you say, "Please God, heal me," you're declaring to the universe and to your own consciousness that you are currently broken, that wholeness is somewhere outside of you, and that you need someone else to grant it to you. This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your consciousness accepts this story as truth, and your experience reflects it back to you. Now, I want to go even deeper into this hidden truth that Smith Wigglesworth uncovered through years of revelation and direct spiritual experience. The difference between petition and recognition isn't just semantic. It's the difference between living as a victim of circumstances and living as the embodiment of divine power. Listen to how these two approaches sound and feel the impact of each one. The old way says, "Dear God, please heal my body. Please send me money. Please fix my relationship. Please make this pain go away." Can you feel the energy behind those words? There's desperation there. There's lack. There's a fundamental assumption that you are empty and broken, waiting for divine intervention to rescue you from your inadequacy. But the new way, the way of recognition, sounds completely different and carries an entirely different frequency. Instead, you declare, I recognize the divine presence that I am. Infinite wholeness is expressing as this body right now. Limitless abundance is the nature of my consciousness. Perfect love is already present in this situation. Do you notice what just happened? You didn't ask for anything. You didn't beg. You didn't position yourself as separate from the solution. Instead, you acknowledged what is already spiritually true. You aligned your awareness with the reality that exists beyond the veil of appearances. If this kind of transformative spiritual content resonates with you, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the deeper teachings I share here. This is where we explore the truth that actually changes lives, not just feels good to hear. This isn't about denying your human experience or pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing a deeper truth that operates behind the scenes of visible circumstances. When you pray from recognition, you're not trying to create something new or convince God to change his mind about you. You're simply becoming conscious of what has always been present. You're awakening to the fullness that was there all along, waiting for your acknowledgement. The power isn't in the words themselves. The power is in the consciousness shift that happens when you stop begging and start being. This is the decision point where everything changes, where your entire spiritual journey takes a new direction. Write in the comments, I recognize what I am if this resonates with you and you're ready to explore this path further. Now let me address something crucial that might be running through your mind right now, because this is where most people get confused and miss the entire point of this transformation. You might be thinking, okay, so I just repeat positive statements about myself and everything will magically change? No, that's not what this is. This isn't another self-help technique where you plaster affirmations on your mirror and hope reality bends to your wishful thinking. What Smith Wigglesworth discovered goes far deeper than the surface level of positive thinking or mental tricks. This is spiritual realization, and there's a world of difference between the two. When you practice positive thinking, you're trying to create something that doesn't currently exist. You're attempting to manufacture a new reality through the force of repetition and belief. But recognition is completely different. You're not creating anything new. You're uncovering what has always been present but hidden from your awareness. The divine presence isn't something that comes and goes based on whether you pray correctly or believe hard enough. It's the eternal reality of your being, patiently waiting beneath the noise of your thoughts and fears for you to finally notice it. This is what Smith Wigglesworth meant when he talked about recognizing God as individual being, not God and you as two separate entities, but simply God appearing as you, expressing as your consciousness, living as your life right now in this very moment. Let me share a real story that demonstrates the impact of this revelation, because theory without application remains just theory. There was a woman named Sarah who lived with chronic pain for 7 years. Every single night she would pray desperately for healing, begging God to take away her suffering. She tried every religious technique, every prayer method, every spiritual practice she could find. Nothing worked. The pain persisted, and with each passing year, her faith crumbled a little more under the weight of what felt like unanswered prayers. She began to wonder if God was punishing her, or if she was somehow unworthy of healing. Then Sarah discovered these teachings about recognition, and at first, it seemed almost offensive to her religious background. How could she pray as if she were God? Wasn't that the height of arrogance? But something about the message resonated deep within her soul. Past all the religious conditioning, she made a decision to try a completely different approach. Instead of beginning her day by begging for healing, she started each morning with simple recognition. The divine presence that I am is perfect wholeness. She didn't try to force the pain away. She didn't visualize it disappearing. She simply acknowledged the greater truth that existed beyond the physical sensation. For the first 2 weeks, nothing changed in her body, but something profound shifted behind the scenes of her awareness. She felt less victimized by the pain, less defined by it. The pain was still there, but it no longer held the same power over her identity. By week 3, she noticed the intensity beginning to decrease. By week 6, she experienced something she hadn't felt in 7 years, a completely pain-free day. Today, Sarah lives without chronic pain. Not because God finally decided to answer her prayers after years of ignoring her, but because she awakened to the truth that wholeness was present all along, waiting for her recognition. Drop a comment saying, "I'm ready for this transformation," if Sarah's journey speaks to something you've been experiencing in your own life. Sarah's story is powerful, but let me show you how this principle works across completely different areas of life. Because once you understand the mechanism behind this transformation, you'll realize it applies to literally every challenge you face. Take Marcus, for instance. He was drowning in $40,000 of debt, watching his business crumble around him, and feeling absolutely desperate. Every night he would pray the same prayer. "God, please send me money, please save my business, please help me survive." His prayers felt like throwing words into an empty void where nothing echoed back. The more desperately he prayed, the worse his financial situation seemed to become. Sound familiar? This is the hidden trap that so many people fall into without realizing it. When Marcus discovered this approach of praying as God rather than to God, something radical shifted in his entire mindset about money and abundance. He stopped asking an external source to rescue him and started recognizing a truth that existed beyond his bank account balance. Every single morning, he would practice this recognition. I am the presence of infinite abundance. Limitless supply is the nature of my consciousness. Notice he wasn't pretending his debt didn't exist or using magical thinking to wish it away. He was acknowledging a spiritual reality that operated behind the scenes of his visible circumstances. He moved from the desperate energy of begging into the powerful frequency of recognition. The impact wasn't immediate, but it was real. Within 3 months, unexpected opportunities began appearing. A former colleague reached out with a consulting offer he hadn't seen coming. A business idea he'd abandoned suddenly attracted interested investors. The flow of money into his life began to shift. Within 18 months, Marcus was completely debt-free, and his business had transformed into something far more successful than it had been before the crisis. The key wasn't that God finally decided to help him after months of ignoring his pleas. The key was that Marcus's consciousness aligned with the abundance that was always spiritually present, and his outer experience began reflecting that inner transformation. But this revelation applies to more than just physical health or financial situations. Consider Jennifer, whose marriage was on the verge of collapse after years of accumulated resentment and emotional distance. She had been praying desperately for God to change her husband, to soften his heart, to make him the partner she needed him to be. Can you see the problem with that approach? She was treating her husband as the problem and God as the solution. Never realizing that this entire framework kept her trapped in powerlessness. Her prayers felt empty because they were focused entirely on changing someone else rather than recognizing truth. When Jennifer learned to pray as God, her entire approach shifted. She stopped asking God to fix her husband and started recognizing the divine presence in him and in the relationship itself. Her daily practice became, perfect love is already present, obscured only by false perceptions. I recognize divine love as the only presence in this relationship. She began seeing her husband through spiritual eyes, rather than through the lens of hurt feelings and disappointment. This wasn't about denying the real problems or pretending everything was fine. It was about acknowledging a deeper reality that existed beneath the surface conflict. The transformation took nearly a year, which shows that this isn't some quick fix or instant miracle formula. But gradually, subtly, everything began to change. Her husband seemed softer, more open, more willing to connect. Old patterns that had felt permanent started dissolving. Their marriage not only survived but became deeper and more authentic than it had ever been, even in the early days. Write in the comments, love transforms everything, if you've experienced or witnessed the power of seeing through spiritual eyes rather than wounded ones. What I'm about to share with you now goes beyond the recognition statements themselves, because Smith Wigglesworth understood that words alone, no matter how powerful, are only the beginning of this journey. There's something even deeper that happens when you learn to embrace what he called the practice of silence. And I'm not talking about just sitting quietly or trying to suppress your thoughts until your mind goes blank. That's not silence. That's mental exhaustion. True silence is something entirely different, something that most people never experience in their entire lives because they're too busy filling every moment with noise, distraction, and constant mental activity. The silence Wigglesworth taught is about resting in the awareness of divine presence without words, without effort, without striving to make anything happen. This is where the real transformation occurs, behind the scenes of your conscious mind. Think about it. Most people approach prayer like they're trying to convince someone of something. They fill their prayer time with endless words, petitions, explanations, bargaining, as if God needs to be persuaded or informed about their situation. But true spiritual power emerges in the silence where all that human effort ceases and divine consciousness reveals itself without interference. If this video shifted something in your consciousness or gave you a new way of seeing prayer, go ahead and hit that like button. It tells me this content is serving you and helps other seekers find these life-changing teachings. Here's the practical application of this. Revelation. After you speak your recognition statements, after you've declared the truth of your divine nature, sit in complete silence for 5 to 10 minutes. And here's the critical part that most people miss. Don't try to make anything happen during the silence. Don't visualize specific outcomes. Don't mentally rehearse your problems or solutions. Don't repeat affirmations in your head. Simply rest in the awareness that divine presence is here now as you. Let that presence do its perfect work without your human mind trying to manage, control, or direct the process. This is incredibly difficult for most people because we're addicted to doing, to controlling, to making things happen through personal effort. But the deepest spiritual power flows when you get out of the way. Now, I want to reveal another hidden truth that keeps people trapped even when they think they're practicing spiritual principles. It's what Wigglesworth called material sense, and it's probably operating in your life right now without you even realizing it. Material sense is the deeply ingrained belief that your good comes from external sources, from specific people, particular circumstances, physical conditions, or material channels. As long as you believe your healing depends entirely on doctors, your abundance depends solely on your job, or your happiness relies completely on other people, you're still praying to God rather than as God. You're still operating from separation and limitation. Here's the shift in mindset that changes everything. Spiritual consciousness recognizes only one source, the divine presence itself. Your good doesn't come from outside circumstances filtering down to you. It comes from infinite consciousness expressing as your being and then manifesting through whatever channels are appropriate. Doctors may be instruments of healing. Jobs may be channels of abundance. People may be vehicles of love, but they are never the source. The source is always the divine consciousness that you are. This distinction has massive implications for how you navigate every decision and challenge in your life. Start catching yourself every single time you think your solution must come from one specific person or particular circumstance. Notice when you're mentally depending on external conditions to provide what you need. This isn't about rejecting practical help or refusing to take action in the world. It's about recognizing where your security truly rests. When you release material sense, you stop being devastated when one door closes because you know the source isn't the door. It's the infinite consciousness expressing through your awareness right now. Drop a comment saying, "The source is within," if you're beginning to see how this perspective shift transforms everything about how you approach your challenges and opportunities. There's another powerful technique that Smith Wigglesworth taught which completely changes your relationship with challenges, and it's called impersonalization. This might sound abstract at first, but once you grasp this concept, it becomes one of the most liberating revelations you'll ever experience. Most of us make a critical mistake when problems appear in our lives. We immediately claim ownership of them. We say my illness, my poverty, my anxiety, my bad luck. The moment you add that possessive pronoun, you're binding that problem to your identity and giving it permission to define who you are. But here's the hidden truth behind appearances. Problems have no personal identity or power. That illness isn't actually yours. It's simply a temporary appearance in consciousness, a false suggestion that has no reality in the divine perfection that is your true nature. Lack isn't your poverty. It's just a belief floating through your awareness that you've mistakenly accepted as truth. When you personalize problems, you give them tremendous power over you. You make them part of your story, part of your identity, part of what you believe to be permanently true about your life. But impersonalization removes that power instantly. Here's how this works in practical application. When facing any challenge, large or small, say silently to yourself, "This has no power because it has no presence in God. It is not mine, not personal, not real. Only divine perfection is present." You're not denying your experience or pretending the challenge doesn't exist on the human level. You're denying the ultimate power and reality behind that experience. You're refusing to accept it as a permanent truth about your identity. This shift in mindset changes the entire energy around the problem. It becomes a temporary cloud passing through your awareness, rather than a solid reality defining your existence. Now let me be completely honest with you about the obstacles you're going to face on this journey, because if I don't prepare you for these challenges, you'll think something has gone wrong when they inevitably appear. The biggest obstacle, hands down, is doubt. Your rational mind is going to resist this entire approach with everything it has. It will tell you this is delusional, arrogant, dangerous, impossible. And here's what's going to happen. You'll practice recognition for a week and feel absolutely powerful, like you've discovered the secret of the universe. Then you'll face a setback. Something will go wrong. A symptom will return. A bill will arrive. A relationship will hit a rough patch. And in that moment, doubt will flood in and you'll question everything. This is completely normal. This is part of the process, not evidence that the process doesn't work. Smith Wigglesworth himself experienced waves of doubt during his years of spiritual discovery. The key is not to engage doubt in endless mental arguments trying to prove your spiritual understanding is correct. That's a trap that will exhaust you. Instead, when doubt arises, simply return to recognition without fighting the doubt. God is present as my being right now. This doubt has no power to change spiritual truth. I rest in what is real. Acknowledge the doubt exists, then gently move past it. Over time, as you accumulate evidence from your own experience, doubt loses its grip on you. The second major challenge is impatience, and this one trips up almost everyone. You want immediate results. You practice for a few days and expect your entire life to transform overnight. When change doesn't happen on your demanded timeline, frustration sets in and you abandon the practice just when it was beginning to take root in your consciousness. But spiritual consciousness develops gradually through consistent practice over time, exactly like building physical strength at the gym. Sometimes demonstrations happen quickly. Those are wonderful but shouldn't be expected every time. Sometimes they unfold over months. The timeline isn't yours to control. Your only job is faithfulness to the practice, regardless of visible results. Write in the comments, "I trust the process," if you're committed to practicing recognition even when doubt and impatience try to pull you away from this truth. Something fascinating happens on this journey that most people misunderstand, and if you don't grasp this concept, you'll abandon your practice right before the breakthrough occurs. There's what Smith Wigglesworth called the demonstration lag, and understanding this hidden mechanism behind manifestation will save you from countless moments of discouragement. Here's what actually happens. Consciousness shifts first, then circumstances follow. Your inner world transforms before your outer world catches up. You may feel completely different inside, more peaceful, more clear, more connected to truth, while nothing visible has changed yet in your external circumstances. This is where most people make a critical mistake in their spiritual journey. They experience genuine inner transformation, and then look around, expecting everything outside to have instantly rearranged itself to match their new consciousness. When the bills are still there, when the symptoms haven't vanished, when the relationship still looks broken, they assume the practice isn't working. But that's like planting a seed, feeling it germinate beneath the soil, and then digging it up 3 days later because you don't see a plant yet. The demonstration is already in motion behind the scenes. Inner transformation always precedes outer change. This is a spiritual law you can absolutely trust. If you're experiencing peace where there used to be anxiety, clarity where there used to be confusion, or a new understanding where there used to be darkness, the physical demonstration is already happening. You just can't see it yet, because it's still forming in the invisible realm, before it becomes visible in your circumstances. Don't let impatience abort this process right before it births into your experience. The power isn't in practicing intensely for 3 days and then quitting. The power is in brief daily practice sustained over time. Consistency matters infinitely more than perfection or duration. 5 minutes every single morning is more transformative than an hour-long session once a month. Now let me show you how this applies in one of the most challenging areas of human experience, dealing with physical symptoms and health issues. When symptoms appear in your body, the old mindset creates immediate panic and total identification with the problem. You become a sick person in your own consciousness. But the new way of praying as God creates an entirely different experience of illness. Your recognition sounds like this. The divine body that I am knows only wholeness. Infinite intelligence is governing every cell right now. Notice you're not denying that symptoms exist or claiming you feel fine when you don't. You're simply refusing to give those symptoms ultimate power or final reality in your consciousness. This is where people get confused and think spiritual practice means rejecting medical help, which is absolutely not what Smith Wigglesworth taught. You visit doctors, you take medicine, you use every practical resource available, but you do all of this while maintaining your spiritual recognition that God is the true healing presence working through all these channels. The doctor isn't your source of healing. The doctor is an instrument through which divine intelligence works. The medicine isn't your savior. It's a vehicle through which the one healing presence operates. This subtle shift in understanding creates an entirely different experience of illness, where peace becomes possible even in the midst of symptoms. When you maintain this consciousness, something remarkable happens. You stop feeling victimized by your body. You stop living in constant fear about what might happen next. You stop giving your power away to diagnoses and prognoses. Instead, you remain anchored in the truth that wholeness is your spiritual nature regardless of temporary appearances. Sometimes this recognition leads to rapid healing. Sometimes it leads to peaceful acceptance. Sometimes it guides you to exactly the right treatment at exactly the right time. The outcome varies, but your inner stability remains constant because you're rooted in something that circumstances cannot shake. Comment: wholeness is my nature. If you're ready to maintain this consciousness even when physical appearances seem to contradict it, the impact of this consciousness extends far beyond personal health into every area where you interact with the world. And I want to show you how this transforms two of the most challenging domains of human experience: your financial life and your relationships with difficult people. When it comes to business and money, most people operate from a place of desperate emptiness. They hustle from fear. They chase opportunities from lack. They make decisions from scarcity consciousness. But when you truly understand that your supply comes from infinite consciousness, rather than from any specific job, client, or economic condition, your entire approach to work transforms. You start creating from overflow instead of from emptiness. You work from a place of fullness rather than desperation. And here's what happens behind the scenes that most people never understand. Consciousness creates conditions. When your inner state radiates abundance and confidence, opportunities respond to that frequency. When your inner state broadcasts lack and fear, you actually repel the very things you're chasing. This isn't mystical thinking. It's the practical impact of how consciousness operates in the material world. People can sense when you're operating from desperate need versus abundant confidence, and that sensing determines how they respond to you, whether they hire you, whether they trust you, whether they want to do business with you. In relationships, especially with difficult people, this same principle applies but requires even more spiritual maturity. The old way is to pray for God to change the other person, fix their behavior, soften their heart, but that keeps you trapped in victimhood, forever dependent on someone else's transformation for your own peace. The new way is recognizing divine presence even in people who hurt you. The consciousness that I am, and the consciousness that they are, is one in God. Now, before you think this means becoming a doormat, let me be crystal clear. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or remaining in toxic situations. Spiritual recognition sometimes leads you to set firm boundaries, end harmful relationships, or remove yourself from dangerous dynamics. But when you do so, you're acting from clarity rather than hatred, from wisdom rather than victimhood, from spiritual authority rather than wounded reaction. You're not trying to punish them or prove they're wrong. You're simply maintaining your consciousness of truth regardless of their behavior. And something fascinating often happens. Either their behavior begins to shift in response to your clear consciousness, or your ability to handle the situation with peace increases dramatically, or circumstances naturally create the healthy distance you need. The outcome varies, but your inner stability remains constant, because you're not depending on their transformation for your well-being. Now I want to reveal what happens when you practice these principles not just for days or weeks, but for months and years with faithful consistency. Something profound occurs that you might not expect. Praying as God stops being a technique you perform and becomes your natural state of being. You don't have to remind yourself constantly that God is present. You simply live from that awareness the way you breathe without thinking about it. This is what Smith Wigglesworth meant by spiritual consciousness becoming your identity rather than your practice. Problems still appear in your life because you're still human navigating a complex world. Challenges still arise, setbacks still happen, difficulties still cross your path. But here's the critical difference. They don't control you anymore. They don't define your identity. They don't shake your foundation. Your inner peace remains stable even when outer circumstances fluctuate wildly. You become anchored in the eternal presence that is your true identity, and that anchor holds steady, regardless of the storms passing through your temporary experience. This isn't about reaching some perfect state where nothing ever goes wrong. It's about being rooted in something so real, so permanent, so true, that the temporary waves can't capsize you. Type, I am anchored in truth if you recognize this journey as your own path and you're committed to walking it regardless of how long the transformation takes. So here we are at the end of this journey together, and if you've made it this far, I know something in this message resonated deeply with you. You're not here by accident. There's a reason these teachings about praying as God rather than to God found their way into your awareness today. Maybe you've been searching for this understanding for years without knowing exactly what you were looking for. Maybe Smith Wigglesworth's wisdom is the missing piece that finally makes everything else click into place. If this content brought you clarity, peace, or a new perspective on your spiritual journey, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to sharing transformative spiritual wisdom that actually works in real life. Not just beautiful theories that sound good, but leave you unchanged. Every video is designed to give you practical insights that shift your consciousness and, through that shift, transform your experience of reality itself. And if you watched all the way through, leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me, so I know you were here and this connected with you." I read every single comment. And there's something powerful about declaring your readiness for transformation publicly. It solidifies the commitment in your own consciousness. If this video added value to your day and expanded your understanding, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this message reach other people who are ready for it, other seekers who are tired of begging and ready to start being. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how consciousness creates your reality and the specific practices that accelerate your spiritual awakening. Click and continue with me over there, because the journey doesn't end here. It's just beginning.